In Britain, if you talk about Atlantis, you're automatically considered to be mad. You don't need to do anything else to qualify for the madhouse. Just say the word Atlantis, and they'll put you in it. However, that's a very irrational view of Atlantis. What's intriguing about the Plato story of Atlantis is that he actually puts a date on it, which very few myths do. He said that it happened 9,000 years before the story reached the Greeks. And that takes us back to 9,600 BC, which is 11,600 years ago.
Right.
And that's smack in the middle of one of the big episodes of sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age. Isn't it intriguing that the phenomenon he describes, which is a worldwide flood, a flood that affected both the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, and which destroyed a great civilization, that such events were happening at that time?
You're listening to Canary Cry Radio, and here are your hosts, Basil and Gonz.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Canary Cry Radio. We've got a great show this week. My name is Basil.
And I'm Gonz, and we've been gone for a while.
This is our special Christmas special episode, our New Year's 2013 episode. No, it's so late in the year now.
We're so far behind.
Sorry.
Our goal is to put one episode out a week, which hopefully we'll get on track and get there, but
we did that. We've done it before.
We've done 2 a week.
No, we were on hiatus. This is a holiday. Hiatus. I don't know what that accent even is. Yeah, so we're back, and we're glad you guys are back listening too. We hope that you had your own Canary Cry hiatus and got to recharge. But we're back. It's a new year. We're going to start doing it right.
Yes. And before we really get going on the topic today, which is Atlantis, Thoth, and the Bible. Yeah. We wanted to pitch the forum real quick. We know you guys wanted a forum, and so Basil somehow got a pencil and paper out and figured out a way to get a forum on our website.
It's fancy.
Some calculations on the chalkboard there.
So it's there, and it's nice and it's shiny, and we know that a lot of you are there, and that's great. But those of you who maybe don't know about it, maybe just go straight to iTunes or for your Canary Cry fix. Just know that there is canarycryradio.com, and there's a forum there, and there's all sorts of other stuff, cool stuff that you can look at.
Yeah, and definitely email us with comments and questions. You can just you can do that if you reach out to us on canarycryradio@gmail.com.
Yep.
And before we jump in, we want to thank all the people that supported Canary Cry Radio either through prayer or financially or however it was this past year. We are so stoked that you guys are part of this thing because we started it and we, Basil and I, we had no idea that it was going to.
It's a step of faith, and you guys are helping us keep it going here. There are some menial costs, and we thank you for stepping out and helping us with that. So
yeah.
All right, now just so you're aware, Gonz, and this is for everybody. I'm going to be real honest with everyone. I kind of forgot we were going to record this tonight, and so I was so excited when I got home from work, and I just kind of hopped straight in bed, was watching my soaps on Hulu, and and I was like, oh, this is going to be real nice. I'm going to have a real early bedtime. I'm going to get up early on Saturday and really get some work done. And I took a couple Advil PM to help, and those are just about starting to kick in right now. So
So Basil's under the influence.
So
pharmakia is.
I need prayer, okay, guys. No, but if I don't know, if I sound distracted or I don't know,
we'll let you know if you give us a thought that you make sound really profound, but really it's really not all that profound.
Yeah, or if I just sound like an idiot, you can just blame it on the drugs and pray for me tonight. So, okay, that was just a forewarning before we get into the mystical Atlantis stuff.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of fitting.
I guess.
In a way.
I'm sure they had loads of Advil PM in Atlantis.
Well,
all right.
Yeah, so our topic tonight is Atlantis, Thoth, and the Bible. And I mean, Atlantis has always been what?
Well, I was just gonna say, I forgot to mention this to you also in the beginning of the show, and I guess just everybody can hear it now. But I'm pretty excited about this show because it's maybe it's just the Advil talking, but I feel like this is kind of going back to some olden days of Canary Cry Radio, just on the ridiculousness, not ridiculous, but just the speculativeness, right? And also it has a little bit to do with like the One World Order and the Masons and stuff. And I think I was like getting a little bit too comfortable, with not angering the powers that be by talking about all their secrets and things like that. But it's kind of gave me a little rush. Again, it could be the drugs, but I'm excited for the show, and you all should be too.
Atlantis, Thoth, and the Bible.
Yeah. Well, Atlantis definitely is one of those things that, I mean, I remember hearing about it. I think I was in high school when I really sort of understood what it was, which was, a story, a mythology of this possible ancient advanced civilization. And what's funny is I was talking actually to my stepdaughter today.
Okay.
And she goes to a Christian school, so she's not going to get this, but I was telling her, like, when I was in 6th grade, 5th grade, I mean, we were taught Egypt. Like, we went through Egypt like crazy. Like, not just, the kind of living they had, but we went through all of their, religions, their gods, Ra, the sun god. I mean, we even did, like, drawings and stuff of the eye. And, like, I'm thinking back and I'm like, wow, this like flood of memories came back. And I'm like, wow, I was being indoctrinated like crazy in the public school system.
Yeah, it's true. It's actually really true that the whole ancient Egypt thing, you don't really think about it, but there's such a huge emphasis on it in school, kind of oddly so.
Yeah. It was definitely Ra, the sun god, Ka, his son, and
the bird god.
And I mean,
Sorry.
Yes, exactly. That was, I couldn't do any better than that.
Yeah.
There you go, people.
So yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah, and we know that this is some obvious stuff that most of you guys probably know. Some of the big historical accounts or things written about Atlantis. Plato, the Greek philosopher, mentioned it. He basically wrote about Atlantis, this land that existed. It was a continent that supposedly laid in the Atlantic Ocean near the Straits of Gibraltar until its destruction, but it seems like he didn't either finish his thoughts or he just let it go because he doesn't really get too detailed about it.
Right.
But it does get mentioned by Plato.
Yeah. Well, and there was I think Disney made a movie about it a little while ago.
Yes. Yeah.
When that one, like, that, I think it was like a span of like 5 years where they're still getting the last of their like hand-drawn animation out, and everybody had really angular looking faces. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Now, we've all heard of the legend of Atlantis. Pure fantasy. Well, that is where you'd be wrong.
That young Thatch gets crazier every year.
I can prove Atlantis exists. I'm sure of it this time. Milo James Thatch. I'm acting on behalf of my employer, who has a most intriguing proposition for
you. So, I don't know. There's that.
I went on a ride called Atlantis. I think it was in Vegas. I was like a kid, and I went on it with my sister.
That's nice.
And we were thoroughly disappointed. It was a terrible ride. It was terrible. It was awful. It was, anyway.
Well, it is a ride in Vegas. It's not really.
It wasn't even a ride.
You're supposed to either be like hammered or, I don't know, with.
Not when you're like 12
or something. Okay. Okay. Atlantis. All right. Continuing on.
All right. Another person that talked about Atlantis is Edgar Cayce. And as some of you guys know, he's known as the Sleeping Prophet. We haven't really talked about him a whole lot. And
no.
I mean, I remember hearing about Edgar Cayce on the History Channel. I think I was in high school actually watching the History Channel, and they did a whole thing about his psychic ability and his ability to tap into the ether and get information and heal people. And he did, tens of thousands of healings, and it was just another one of those things. And his prediction was that a tomb would be discovered beneath the Sphinx at Giza, in which, I guess, in the tomb, Atlantis's existence would be verified and confirmed. So,
right.
Who knows?
And do we have anything else about that?
I've heard.
Did we follow up with him?
Well, I mean, all we would have to do is follow up on David Wilcock, because he claimed to be the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce and even wrote a book about it.
Oh,
yeah. So
that's nice.
But I think in my days of following people like Wilcock, I remember him talking about somebody who, because they won't let you dig. There used to be Zawi Hawass, but now I don't know who's in charge over there. But in Egypt, they don't just like let you dig stuff. But
understandably so,
right? But there was, I think, some seismograph stuff done which verified that there is some sort of chamber or something underneath the Sphinx.
Right.
But yeah, they can't go any further than that right now. So
that's probably for the best.
Yeah. They'll probably find the Ark of the Covenant or something.
Something cool.
Yeah. So yeah, how did you hear about Atlantis? What do you remember? Is there anything?
Well, yeah. I mean, Discovery Channel was a big. I think was the big one for me, besides the Disney Channel as well, and their crappy movie. But I remember watching it was a documentary on the Disney Channel, documentary channel. Thank you, Advil.
Discovery Channel.
What did I say?
You said documentary channel.
All right, I gotta slow down. The Discovery Channel or Nat Geo or one of those was watching a documentary on Atlantis, and they had it was one of the big unmanned submarine little robot ones where they had found the Titanic and cruised around,
right?
And so somebody was looking for Atlantis, and I don't know exactly what it was. There's a lot of rocks and things underwater, but I just remember thinking as a kid, like, that's so cool. And I didn't really think about it, but then a few years later, I saw it again. I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Those are really expensive robots. Why are they doing this? Who's giving them money to do this? This is a ridiculous thing to do."
Yeah.
And now knowing what I know now about all the, rich and powerful people who would love to find their ancient technologies and secret knowledge of the universe that they believe would be there, I now know that there are probably a certain number of very wealthy and powerful gentlemen smoking big cigars in I don't know, an old train somewhere or something, who are putting up the money to do that.
Yeah. And there was a few years ago, there was somebody, a couple or something, that took underwater. This might be what you're talking about. Underwater pictures of what looked like pyramid structures. Maybe. And it was off the coast of somewhere. I don't remember where it was. I think it was the Gulf.
That's supposed to be the Bermuda Triangle. Isn't that kind of connected to the same thing?
Yeah, it's that general area. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so maybe something is going on there. But my basic theory, I think doing the research for this episode, definitely I came to a point where I'm like, maybe my theory is wrong, but I can sort of reconcile it, using some twisted logic.
Right.
But my basic theory is that Atlantis, the bulk of it anyway, was the antediluvian world, the pre-flood world,
right? That
we know so little about through the Bible. We get glimpses of what happened. There's extra biblical texts that seem to give us more of a glimpse of what was going on. But that's what I think it was. And I think after some of the research here, some of that information, well, obviously the information survived the flood and survived the destruction of whatever Atlantis was potentially after that point, in some form.
And there's some interesting things regarding Atlantis, and we're gonna focus more on Atlantis and sort of how where that would relate to the Bible, and later on we'll talk about the Emerald Tablets. But just on the surface, there's a very surface level of the Atlantis mystery, which is, supposedly Atlantis sank into the ocean,
right?
Or, was covered by water. And so, the flood, Noah's flood is a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some people that have speculated, like geologists who are Bible-believing Christians, and I don't know, I don't have the names in front of me, but I've listened to lectures and stuff in the past where they've talked about how the earth was, geologically different before the flood. And when you read some of the scriptures and talks about, God separated the waters from the waters and all this stuff, there's speculation out there that the earth was, it was this big sphere, but there was a layer of water, and then there was this layer above the water that was granite, or some other, substance.
Right.
The firmament, in Hebrew. And then above that was, like a cloud layer sort of thing.
Right, kind of the canvas.
Yeah, the canvas.
Some of the more scientific Christians would know. And just real quick, also the concept of Pangea as well,
right,
is just to make this nice little scientific Bible connection is, that's a very scriptural thing too as well. So that's sort of the era we're talking about.
Right. I mean, obviously secular sciences will tell us that Pangea was whatever, millions or billions of years ago or whatever, but it's quite possible that it wasn't that long ago, closer to maybe 10,000 or 20,000 years or something. I don't know.
Right.
And they make sense because the Bible talks about no rain at that point. The mist came from the ground to feed the plants and all this stuff. And, maybe that's why there's and I was just speculating here, but maybe that's why humans have this like strange affinity with fountains. Notice how people just they love fountains.
Yeah.
And you go to Vegas and you have like this huge water show and all this stuff. And it's like, maybe that's some kind of, memory in the human, spirit or something that before the destruction of the world through Noah's flood, there was some pretty impressive fountain-like things that watered the earth.
I like myself a good fountain.
Yeah. So I mean, these are just speculation. Larger plants, so things were bigger and fruit was bigger.
Right. Actually, I just became aware of a certain large Christian institution who spent $1 million on a fountain recently. Really? Yeah. So I mean, I think that's that's
a really good way to spend church money.
We like our fountains. I'm not saying it's a church. Not saying
it's not a church.
Just saying it's a Christian institution.
Christian institution. That sounds like
we're just gonna leave it there.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Let's go on.
Okay.
Before we okay.
Atlantis. That's what
Atlantis.
Yeah. There it is.
Okay. So living in that era before the flood was quite different. I think there was something very different, obviously with just your day to day.
There's probably dinosaurs as well.
Probably. Yeah. I would say so.
This was before the flood, and that's, what killed the dinosaurs, in my opinion.
It's possible. Yeah.
They couldn't fit on the ark. Sorry, Rex.
Maybe. What if it was a baby Rex or an egg Rex?
Well, what happens to baby Rexes? They get bigger.
Yeah, not in 40 days though.
Gonz, you don't know that.
Actually, they were in there longer. Anyway, okay. So, so what we're going to try to do here is start in the Bible and trace the possible, I guess you can call it an incursion, or because what I believe is that whatever knowledge was passed down through Atlantis and all this stuff, that's the knowledge that came from fallen angels. Like that's just that's my take on it.
Right.
And we're going to try to give you through the Bible and some other extra biblical text a line of thinking, like where did it really start? Where did it really come from? And I think Satan was around obviously doing his thing, but somehow he had to, infect the rest of us, right?
Indeed. And it instantly sounds like a heretical thing, much like a lot of the things we talk about here. The evidence of Atlantis in the Bible, or where Atlantis would fit in if it in fact was a real thing. And so just bear with us and it will all make sense eventually.
But yeah, let's start in Genesis 4:11 and 12, which is basically the account of Cain. Mm-hmm. And Cain, he was, after he killed Abel.
He was just a restless soul.
He just was not good. He was bad. So it's very simple, you know.
He's troubled. He's troubled.
Troubled. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's cursed and driven from the ground, and it says here in verse 12 of Genesis 4, it says, "When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." And so you think about Cain, right? And he's again, the earth looks different now. You know, it's not like, all right, I'm going to wander over to Africa, or I'm going to wander over to, I don't know, the Americas or something. It just geologically, it's potentially different.
Yes.
And the Bible tells us that he goes east of Eden to the land of Nod, and which is, I don't know if you've heard about this, Basil, but it's like some land of Nod is we get a magazine occasionally, a catalog. I think it's a store of some kind that sells
called Land of Nod.
Yeah, they sell like girly products or something.
What the heck?
Yeah, I was telling my wife that, and anyway. But here's the thing that I find interesting, because I think Cain, he's cursed. I think there's something there about being cursed there that opens up the invitation of these beings to come in and start helping him out, because...
Right. Well, Cain, he was pretty pissed off at this point, I would imagine.
Yeah, and he can't grow food, right? Because he's cursed, and he can't, you know, God basically says you can't grow crops. Like, you're just
and there's
not gonna be able to do
some tension there between him and God, which makes him prime target for some other celestial beings.
Yeah. And I think what happened was, okay, Cain goes to the land of Nod, and he's unable to produce crops from the ground, so he's got to figure out a different way to sustain life. And I think that's when the sons of God started coming down and started talking to Cain somehow, maybe.
Side note, the sons of God, we just did an episode on those guys.
Those guys, yeah, the Divine Council.
Our good friend, Dr. Michael Heiser.
Yeah.
So if you're confused, you can go listen to that at your leisure.
Yeah, and Michael Heiser was awesome.
Yeah. Just as a note, I'm sorry. Those of you who haven't listened to the Michael Heiser, Sons of God they're not good guys.
Well, yeah, they're the ones that were part of what's called the Divine Council, which is basically God's bureaucracy, if you will, is how Michael Heiser puts it.
Right.
And they basically rebelled. They followed Satan, which, I mean, I was thinking about this, you know, as I was putting this together, but is it possible that they actually came down, the sons of God came down to actually help Cain, like, genuinely, you know, like maybe God was like,
right. Well, I think it's possible. And there are allusions to that all over the place. Just even Lucifer's name being the light bringer, and the secret society, the power that be, the Masons, the Illuminati's worship basically of the light bringer bringing knowledge, which is more or less what these sons of God are at this time that we are talking about, may have been helping out Cain, bringing some knowledge to help him survive.
Yeah, so it's kind of ambiguous as to whether it's a truly evil thing. It's you know, because I'm not sitting here saying, you know, all the things he was taught was evil, and here you go. But it's interesting to kind of think about and speculate there. But Cain has a son named Enoch, but this Enoch is not the Enoch that we're used to hearing about, or at least I don't think.
Right.
As far as, I mean, it's definitely not the Enoch that comes from the other line, Seth's line, the one that's you know, the bloodline for the Messiah.
We're at a different point in time here. We're talking third generation human being.
Yeah.
At this point,
not too far into the.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So different Enoch, not the Book of Enoch.
No. Well, see, that's the thing that I'm like, well, maybe the book, but anyway.
Okay.
That's maybe for another scholar or something.
Open for discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, Cain, if you keep reading there in Genesis, Cain basically builds a city. And okay, so if you're building a city, he's the first generation human, right? Or second generation, second generation human. And he's building a city, and he names it the city of Enoch.
Right.
He names it after Enoch. And so I think this city is basically like the blueprint, you know? I mean, okay,
yeah, this is the first city.
Yeah.
Where once we were living with God in the garden, the stewards of creation and living where once we lived in a symbiotic relationship with God and nature and creation, and we're all together living happily, how presumably, we are created to live. Now Cain goes off, cursed, gains knowledge from these beings who give him knowledge of alchemy and building and technology, basically. And now Cain decides to go build himself a city.
Right. It's all kind of too much of a coincidence, I think. But yeah, this is, I guess, the first utopian, quote unquote, society that I guess Cain tried to create after the fall. So just something to speculate there. And then it really doesn't give us a whole lot more other than the fact that Enoch has a child named Irad. Irad has a child named Mehujael, which means to strike God. He has a son named Methushael, which means man of God, interestingly. Then he has a son named Lamech, and then Lamech practices a little polygamy action there and marries two wives, Adah and Zillah. And from Adah, Lamech has two kids named Jabal, which he's affiliated with livestock and tents. And Jubal is the other one, affiliated with harps and the flute and all the musical instruments. And then Lamech, with his other wife, Zillah, has the child Tubal-Cain, who is... Did you do the dun-dun-dun?
I was about to.
Okay.
Dun-dun-dun.
There it is. Yeah, Tubal-Cain, and he's affiliated with bronze making and metal, making tools, and...
He's a craftsman.
Yeah, and so it's very interesting that that's the generation that is noted as being, defined generation of technological or civilization or advancing in civilization and knowledge or something.
Right, and interestingly enough, Tubal-Cain, for those of you who are up on your masonry handbook, is a very, very dominant character.
Right.
Because of the whole obsession with crafting and masonry and things like that they basically worship. So that's where we're at, and that's where he comes from.
Yeah, and just a note here, we're going to leave this note for a later connection, a possible connection. I mean, there may be nothing to it, but when you look at the generations from Enoch, this different Enoch from Cain's line, to Tubal-Cain and Jabal and Jubal, it's 5 generations. So just kind of have that hanging out in your brain, and then we'll get to a possible connection. But yeah, so I mean, there's some different things here, and as I was doing this, and then it kind of in chapter 4 of Genesis, it sort of ends there, and it goes into how Seth was born in place of Abel, and it goes through Seth's line, which is the messianic line. And I don't know, there was a part of me that was like, okay, God talks about 2 seeds, and here's the Bible like really explaining 2 seeds. And I didn't want to go there, and I really didn't in the research end of it, but it just made me think like, man, this is really weird. Like,
right. Well, it's true. I mean, what you've got here is Cain, the first murderer the first murderer ever for the most part. And what we have here is he's cast out, he leaves, he bails, he goes to the land of Nod. And we're considering that the sons of God, the divine council, may have came down and talked with him, been like, look, this is a bummer, man, that you're cursed, and this is, we're here to help you out. It teaches him, gives him the, knowledge of craftsmanship, of technology, of all sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think the Genesis 6 account is alluding to this idea that, hey, we'll give you this knowledge, but hey, those women you got there, let's do a little trade-off.
Exactly. They come down, they give technology, and that's where the sons of God come down. And we see the 5 generations down from Cain, we've got the master craftsman, Tubal-Cain, who is, one of the main figures of, secret societies today and things like that. And so we have Cain, a line of Cain, who's building the cities, who's getting all the technology. And, and then we have the line of Seth, the messianic line.
Yeah, the messianic line, the good line. So when we look at we know that Seth, there was another Enoch born who walked with God and who was no more. And and all that stuff. And presumably this is the Enoch that could possibly be attributed to maybe the first chapter, or maybe just the Book of Watchers or something of the Book of Enoch. I think when you get further into the Book of Enoch, it starts getting a little crazy. The more you go into it, the further away it goes from things that are mentioned in the Bible. So
right, and we've got a whole episode on that. You can find that.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the archives there. But Noah has 3 sons that would survive the flood with him, right? And from the day Enoch was born until the day Noah had his 3 sons was about 934 years. So that's a long time. I mean, think about how much we've come in 100 years,
Yeah.
And the speculation is that, hey, 100 years with maybe some new portals opening up in the last century. But that's all speculation. But anyway, that's a long time. That's a long time for stuff to develop. So who knows what was going on, before the flood.
Yeah, well, that's where the whole speculation comes in, where, the antediluvian technology, where just amazing technological feats may have existed at that time, and the world, we think of it as this sort of, everybody living in tents and goat herding and things like that. But it could have been a much more whimsical type of existence.
Yeah, and I actually think there's a lot of the ancient mythologies that we read about is based on the antediluvian world.
Right.
The creatures we find and...
Right. There's talk of creatures, of genetic mutations, of UFOs, of things like that, all existing before the flood. And this is something that it's just a huge mind bender, because it goes against everything that we've, ever thought about the ancient times. But I'm sure that there are those of you who are well read up on that. Yeah, definitely. So Noah was 600 years old when the floods came. So there's just a couple interesting tidbits that I busted out my calculator and I'm like, I'm going to do some calculations. Whoa.
Lamech, who is Noah's father, who was 184 when he had Noah, died when he was 777 years old, which meant that he died 595 years after he had Noah, which is only 5 years before the flood. But more interestingly, Methuselah, who's Noah's grandpa, whose name means man of dart, weapon, or, men are sent away or something. Some kind of prophetic implication of something terrible happening.
Right.
Lived until the year the flood came. And
he died before the flood, or did he die in the flood?
I think he died the year of the flood. And actually, as I was doing these calculations, I realized that I had heard this teaching from Chuck Missler at some point.
Right.
And it's kind of weird to confirm something you heard a few years ago through just your own research. But basically what Chuck Missler was talking about was that Methuselah, the name in Hebrew, was a prophecy that was known to send the flood. It was going to be when he died, then, that's when God was going to judge the world. So, he makes a joke about like, oh man, it must have been really bad every time he got sick. People start freaking out,
Right.
So
funny.
I know. Funny guy. Chuck Missler. Chucky. Which, interestingly, I've seen him twice in person, and both times it was... the first time was really interesting. The second time, he couldn't get his slides to work. So he was...
bummer.
It was a real bummer, and he looked like he was really confused, and he's getting up there in age, too, so I think he was kind of over it. You can tell he was totally over being up there after like 10 minutes because the screen wasn't working.
That could get old.
Yeah. But, okay, let's just speculate like crazy for a moment. And
okay.
I think we're going to start labeling this as hyper speculation. I just like the sound of that because it's safe. You can say, hey, this is a hyper speculation moment, and we can just ramble off whatever. And
say whatever we want.
Yeah, and then if someone says, you guys said this, we can say, well, if you listen closely, it was a hyper speculation moment. So...
Yeah. All right.
Anyway,
well, so there you go. Don't listen to the next minute and a half as Gonz goes through his hyper speculation moment.
Yeah. Okay. So you can see that even after the flood, when Noah, Noah was a man of soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard and all this stuff.
Right.
Cain's line was like metal, bronze tools and tents and just all this stuff. And we just talked about this, how Adam's line perhaps had this symbiotic relationship with nature, and we were, once one, and the Cain's line's over there, making hybrids and mating with fallen angels and getting Nephilim all over the place and
just doing weird stuff.
Yeah, and so there's obviously a genetic tampering, right, that happens in Cain's line. Like, something bad happens. And could this be like the fifth race that we always hear about, the Aryan race and all this stuff it's actually attributed to Atlantis? Could it be that they're either the sons of God or maybe they're, the first class of Nephilim that created some kind of hierarchy? I mean, who knows? But I think let's consider the possibility that before the flood, the world, that's what people refer to as Atlantis, and that was part of the judgment of God during Noah's flood. Was, hey, we're destroying Atlantis.
Okay,
but there's another possibility here. But to get there, we have to sort of speculate. We got to continue speculating here.
All right, continue the regular speculation or hyper speculation.
I don't know. I don't know anymore.
Okay, let's just continue.
All right. So when you read like Graham Hancock's work, or you read some, obviously Zachariah Sitchin and some of these other guys, they talk about, the Anunnaki or some other god race, right? Lowercase g god beings that came down. I mean, most of them think that's just aliens or whatever. Right. But they talk about how they acknowledge that the flood happened, but they also, twist things around, and they say like, these gods created a craft, and Noah's Ark was actually like an aircraft, and they went out into space, and they came back down and whatever. So they have these different things. So when we look at it through the filter of the Bible, Genesis 6 talks about when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, there were Nephilim in the land, and also afterwards, and then we've debated about what that means. Was it a second incursion? Was it did the sons of God just come back, or so? Right. So again, the possibility that like, okay, these other accounts talk about these beings lifting off the earth and then coming back down. Maybe they did, that's just speculating. Like maybe the bad guys, if you will, did do that. And the other possibility is that, this is Rob Skiba's theory. And so I'm sure some of you guys are pretty well versed in this, but his theory is that Ham's wife had some kind of contaminated Nephilim DNA. And it's true that when you look at Ham's line, it's like all the terrible tribes and clans and stuff come from Ham.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Ham's. I mean, Nebuchadnezzar came from Ham.
You mean Nimrod.
Nimrod.
There it is. That's the pharmakia speaking there. He wants you to be confused.
Whew! I need to focus.
So that's a possibility. Another possibility to just speculate is that Ham himself smuggled onto the ark some tablets or something, some knowledge of whatever these other guys had. But actually, jumping back to Rob Skiba's theory, Tubal-Cain's sister, in that verse that talks about Tubal-Cain, it says he had a sister named Naamah. And when you look up what that word means, it means pass in beauty, be delight, be pleasant. So maybe she was the one that.
Maybe she was Nephilim.
Well, what? I'm saying maybe she was. If let's.
She was desired by the sons of God.
Right. She was the one that was like spreading the love.
Oh, mama. The one not wearing the head covering, as we discussed with Michael Heiser.
Exactly. We're going to do as many Heiser episode pitches that we can fit into this episode.
She wasn't wearing her traditional head covering, and she had beautiful hair.
Right. And so the sons of God were like, that means good babies.
That meant she was fertile.
Right. And so out come these Nephilim.
Okay.
To terrorize. What do you do as a parent when your child is a Nephilim?
Yeah, my mom thought she had it bad.
Okay, so any of these things are possible. Ham bringing sacred knowledge on, the DNA thing. And then the third one is obviously that the second incursion that the sons of God just came back somehow. Either they left and they came back. But here's what I'm trying to think of here. And I'm speculating again. And again, we're not Bible scholars here. We're just couple of chumps trying to.
So are you talking about how the technology how technology made it past the flood? Is that what you're referring to?
Not necessarily the technology, but whatever information was necessary for the sons of God or, these beings to openly communicate with humans and influence them in a certain way.
What exactly are we saying made it past the flood?
Okay. It's possible that because what we're trying to figure out is how the Nephilim were around after the flood as well. And obviously we read the Old Testament and there's all sorts of crazy tribes running around, all happen to come from Ham's line, that are terrorizing people, and God tells the Israelites to wipe them out, right?
Right.
And so knowing that, we know that something happened, somehow the Nephilim thing reappeared after the flood, after the judgment of the earth of wiping the most, the other guys out.
Okay.
So the speculation is many layers of speculation. One is that, okay, what's the information that was passed? Or, the information could have been passed genetically, as Rob Skiba says, through Ham's wife, or it could have been a tablet that Ham brought onto the ship, or the actual sons of God just came back. They survived the flood and they came back.
Something made it past the flood to corrupt.
Right. And this is gonna bother the people that are really hold on to their Bible, because they say, no, everything was destroyed. Everything that crawled the earth was destroyed. Right. But
what if they weren't on the earth?
That's yeah, exactly.
Okay.
that was my point. And then
there we go.
The other theory that I know this is not a new theory, but something that I was thinking about was the curse of Canaan opening up portals or allowing some of these entities to communicate openly with humans again. And in Genesis 9:24, it talks about how Noah, after he plants a vineyard, because he was a farming guy, and he drinks his wine, he has a little bit too much wine. And then in Genesis 9:24, it says, when Noah woke from his wine and found out what his youngest son had done to him, he cursed him. So, I was reading that and I'm like, man, Ham must have done something pretty bad there. The understanding is normally that Ham saw his father naked, and back in those days it was a no-no, which I agree. That's probably, it says that.
It's a little bit of a no-no nowadays, I'd say.
Yeah. So, something weird.
Okay.
So Canaan is cursed. And when we look at people who are cursed previous to that, obviously, man, Satan, they're cursed, kicked out of the garden. But then the first one that's really cursed post-fall of man is Cain. And he, look what happened to Cain's line, and all sorts of crazy stuff happened, right? With Tubal-Cain and all those guys.
Okay.
And then you look at Canaan's line, and it's possible that he opened something up and he shared it with his brothers, and it goes out of control.
True.
Ham's kids are just out of control.
Ham, get your kids under control, man. Yeah, well, it's true. Ham's line has caused quite a stir in the historical references. And so now we have Canaan, who's cursed because of something that happened, while Noah was drunk and naked. And so where do we go from there?
Well, okay. So, those are the theories of how possibly the information was passed
how
on.
Some more evil or some more corruption could have been introduced after the flood.
Right.
Because obviously something has gone wrong.
Right.
We're a few thousand years after the flood, and
well, I wouldn't say a few thousand. Probably a few hundred, because they lived longer then. But
no, I'm talking about right now.
Oh, okay.
And things have gone awry.
Right.
So obviously something has gone wrong.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the line of Ham real quick. Let's just get it straight.
Okay. So
how bad are these kids?
Okay. So Ham has Cush, and it's interesting because it gives Cush's line, it gives two more lines after Cush, but then after that it says Cush is the father of Nimrod, who built the tower. So it makes me think
we've basically got Ham, who's the great-great-grandfather of Nimrod, and Nimrod being probably the biggest blatant, slap in God's face,
right,
in the human race at that point.
Right. And obviously God puts an end to the Tower of Babel, but it doesn't really tell us what happened after that. What happened to Nimrod? Where'd he go? What did his people do? And, so Another hole for speculation. But so some of the other kids that Ham had, obviously Canaan. And Canaan's first son was named Sidon, Sidon, which in English anyway. And I mean, immediately, if it doesn't spark people's minds with Sidonia and the Phoenician, the symbolism there of the rising phoenix and everything that comes from that, and even Mars, all the astrological knowledge there. And then from there, the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites came after that. So,
right, and which are basically all of the people that when we talk about the Old Testament, God's like talking to his people, and he's going to the land and kill everyone, smite them, and this is where a lot of times people are, the God of the Old Testament was a little bit grumpy all the time and wanted to smite everyone. But when we're talking about the Hittites and Jebusites and the Amorites and everybody of these guys, these came from the corrupted line of Ham.
Right. See, that's the thing that really gets at me is like this information, although it sounds just off the wall and there is some points of speculation, really it helps tie together a lot of...
It really does. I mean, this isn't just arbitrary God, telling his people to just slaughter for no reason.
Right.
This slaughter is part of a long generational rebellion that included mating with the sons of God's other celestial creatures. It included Nimrod, the god king who built the Tower of Babel, who we're talking about some serious lines of rebellion here. And this should not be surprising to us. There's a lot of talk of generational issues with God, and we all might die and we'll forget about him, but God, this is a long story happening.
Yeah, definitely. And if we continue on with some of the kids that Ham had, obviously we were on Canaan. Canaan's clans eventually become occupants of Sodom and Gomorrah. So there you go. God
Boom,
probably trying to squash them again.
Another one.
And they were going after strange flesh there. So, they were, and that's not just homosexuals. I think they were going after strange flesh, like aliens.
And we're talking about chimeras, and we're talking about all sorts of strange things.
Right. And then another kid that Ham had was named Mizraim, which basically means Egypt. And that was, he from his line came the Castleites. I don't know how to pronounce that. Castleites? I don't know. But that was the line that the Philistines came from. So again, giants.
Now we have the Philistines.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah, this is all coming from the same line, which is...
And that's the thing. Once you start making these connections, the Old Testament really starts making a little bit more sense.
Right.
At least to our tiny human brains.
Our tiny human confused little brains. So when we look at after this happens, in Genesis 10:25, there's a genealogy there. And it goes from Noah, and if you follow the line of Shem, which is another one of the sons of Noah, you get to this guy named Eber, and then Eber had two sons, and one of them was named Peleg. And it actually says there in Genesis 10:25, the name of one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided, or the earth was split. And then it says his brother's name was Yoktan. The earth being split, the word there is the same word as firmament in Genesis, which, again, we can start speculating all sorts of things, because when you start thinking about, hey, maybe after the flood, some of the geology changed and the tectonic plates started moving, and it took a little while for stuff to settle.
Right.
And, when Peleg was around, a major catastrophe happened where perhaps this island out in the middle of the Atlantic sank. And maybe that was the last place where after... the Tower of Babel went down. Maybe that was the last place where they tried to establish this kingdom one last time. And the Bible doesn't talk about it, but we can speculate that. I mean, maybe that was where Nimrod went and tried to do this thing, or maybe it was another part of another tribe that was gaining ground on creating some kind of world empire. Who knows?
Well, and see, that's the thing about the Bible as well, is we're given information, but we're also not given a lot of information.
Yeah.
We're talking about how Cain Well, for instance, in the habit of the Bible is to only mention sons or even certain sons of offspring of certain dudes.
Right.
And
sometimes
so
they skip generations too. And
right,
they don't tell
exactly.
you.
And that's a good example of the sort of stuff that we're not told. And you got to keep in mind that there's a whole civilization happening at the time of these stories. So the possibilities of what other humans who are not documented in the Bible are doing is endless, really.
Yeah, and when you look at just to finish up this Genesis 10 thing here, and again, this idea of Peleg is mentioned also in Luke 3 and also in 1 Chronicles 19 and again in Genesis 11. But it mentions Peleg's brother, whose name was Joktan, and Joktan, Joktan, in the Bible, his name actually comes from a word katan. It's Qaton, and it basically means he will be made little or insignificant. So again, I mean, if you put on the Atlantis goggles, right, and you read this verse of
right.
like, okay, during Peleg's day, the earth was divided. It was split. Something catastrophic happened.
Right.
And then the mention of his brother, Joktan, which means he was made little or insignificant. Like maybe there was this great civilization spawning that was made insignificant. I don't know. We can speculate on that.
Right. Or he shrank to a tiny size.
Right. Because it survived. And
that's where the race of leprechauns came from.
So let me mention this, though. Remember earlier when I said that there was 5 generations from Enoch to Tubal-Cain?
I remember you saying that.
Well, interestingly, it's 5 generations from Shem to Peleg when stuff was judged. So maybe
5 generations, you say?
Yeah, maybe there's a thing where after about 5 generations, whatever the sons of God were trying to do, was starting to come together after about 5 generations. Who knows? This is just all speculation.
Right. Are we referring to an pre-diluvian Atlantis or now Peleg Atlantis?
Right. So right. So again, just speculation here. I think the source of the information or the esoteric knowledge or whatever you want to call it, sacred knowledge, is from the antediluvian world. And I think you can call it Atlantis. It kind of turns into a semantics thing, I think.
Okay.
But then I think it's possible, based on what we know here through the Bible, that this landmass out in the middle of the ocean was, again, the last attempt for the sons of God to like really establish their kingdom on earth. And it was the last time God was like, actually, no, that's not going to happen. Like, you've already done enough damage. I got to go talk to my messianic line and get them to fight people and other tribes and stuff to get rid of your mess.
Basically clean up your mess.
Yeah, basically clean up your mess. So no more of you, right? So you guys go away. And that's the end of Atlantis, and that's where the legend comes from. So I kind of think it's not either or, it's kind of both,
So what you're getting at here is you think that the Atlantis is a mixture between the antediluvian sort of world, and when that survived or came back or was revived somehow after the flood by the line of Ham to sort of bring back, the good old days.
Right.
That was destroyed once more.
Right. And that's where the sinking island legend comes from.
Right. The sinking island legend. Because that's not what the New Agers are trying to tell me.
What are they trying to tell you?
Well, they're trying to tell me that Atlantis was an island that had all sorts of, power cortexes and portals and things where these wonderful race of human beings lived who had all sorts of nice powers and glowed and had telekinesis and could speak to each other without speaking, lived there and sort of watched over the place. And then Martians came and landed there, and were hanging out with them, and they sort of got along for a while. And those Martians, they have a more masculine personality, is what I'm told, and they just started to sort of mess everything up, and push comes to shove and the island sinks.
Yeah, and that's actually portrayed, that narrative, if you will, was portrayed in a video. I can't remember the name of the video. It's the one where Thoth,
I know the series you're talking about. The series is a YouTube series called Spirit Science. Spirit
Science, that's what it was called.
Yes.
And a lot of that information is actually based on the Emerald Tablets.
The Emerald Tablets, what are those?
It's what they sound like. They're Emerald Tablets. I mean, I don't think there's anything crazy.
Okay, all right. So they're Emerald Tablets, and this is from a guy named Thoth.
Allegedly, Thoth is the one that delivered this message to some people in the ancient days, and they wrote it down on these jade, or actually, no, I think the Thoth gave it to him.
Right.
On these emerald tablets. And
Thoth is a guy, he's actually familiar. A lot of us would recognize him if we saw a depiction of him.
Yeah. And actually, alluding back to my elementary school days, we drew pictures of Thoth. We drew pictures of the guy with the bird face.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Thoth, was he an Egyptian god, or was he
he's an Egyptian god.
Egyptian god. He's the guy with the big striped blue and gold hair and a bird face.
Bird face. Yeah. And he's associated with Apollonius and Akhenaten, and Hermes is another form that he takes, if you will. And that's where the Hermetical order and stuff, all the the esoteric stuff comes from. And just interestingly also, the Taoist tradition, they even have legends of jade books that contain sacred knowledge.
Right.
And also in Sumerian lore, there's a character named Nisaba who continually seeks wisdom for a star map from the tablets made from precious stone.
Right.
And also in Muslim mystical lore, the archangel Israfel is an owner of a jeweled tablet of fate. So tablets are a big thing. And then,
So shiny tablets. Thoth is another one of these guys who brought shiny tablets to the people of Atlantis.
Right.
And written on these tablets were sort of the story of history and some commandments and
ancient wisdom.
Ancient wisdom, exactly. That's how I'd put it. And this ancient wisdom, you guessed it, is also held very delightfully tightly by our good friends, the Freemasons and the Illuminati and stuff like that. And you can actually get a copy of the translated Emerald Tablets and see sort of what he has to say.
Yeah.
And some of that's pretty interesting, is it not, Gonz?
Yeah, we'll get into that in a second, but a couple things I wanted to point out.
Sure.
One, I think it's as I was reading through the list of like ancient, records or mythology or whatever you want to call it of these tablets, they're always like they're emerald or they're jade or they're, these star maps and they're these things. And then, God of the Old Testament, our God, uses stone.
Yeah.
It's like he's not really into the glitz and glamour thing.
Yeah, he's a pretty straightforward guy. That's how he works. I mean, he sent little baby born in a feeding trough, and gives us some info on just regular stone tablets, and it's not shiny at all. And everyone else gets these highly valued precious stones.
A jeweled tablet of fate.
Yes. And the golden tablets.
Tablets, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, these back to the Emerald Tablets, the version that we're going to quote here was done by some doctor a couple centuries ago as a translation, and many people believe that that this translation and also just the records of the Emerald Tablets contain the secrets of alchemy and all the ancient knowledge or whatnot.
Right.
But the history of the origin of the tablets is kind of murky. Like, people don't really know exactly where it comes from. And there's various stories about how it happened. There's a version that says Hermes, who's the one that actually like recorded it, who is also known as Thoth, was the son of Adam, who wrote how to atone for Adam's sins. So that's in some mythology.
Okay.
The Jewish mystics say that it was written by Seth and was preserved and brought on the Ark of Noah, which again,
could be
could have been Ham.
Right.
Could have been Ham, bringing stuff he shouldn't have.
Just hamming it up. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. You're doing good. You're doing good. There's a couple versions of the story that says that Noah hid it and then Moses found it. And then another version says Abraham's wife, Sarah, found it later and it contained the information for the Ark of the Covenant. And, there's all sorts of, but anyway, there's a bunch of different things going on and no one exactly knows where the originals are. Some people say it's in the Ark of the Covenant. Others have, speculated that it's buried somewhere or some illuminist has it or something. Who knows where they are.
Right. And we'll find out when we start talking about the context of the Emerald Tablets that hopefully they're nowhere near any of those places.
Right. But one thing that stayed consistent with everything was that they were rectangular green tablets and the relief lettering of some kind of strange alphabet resembled something that looked like it was from ancient Phoenician.
So are these contemporary things that people have seen that they exist, or
see,
where?
I don't know because they've only been passed down through quote unquote translations.
Okay.
But at the same time, there's rumors and stuff of people hearing it through the centuries. So I don't know. I don't know if academically people say that it's, just a myth or whatever, but
right.
Who knows,
All right.
And then, I found this point interesting as well, that the Catholic Church at one point taught some of the information that was in the Emerald Tablets as
classic,
as they felt it supported Christian doctrine, and it was required reading for European scholars.
Corpus Hermeticism.
Yep.
Hermeticum.
Yep. And even today there's images of Hermes put all over the cathedrals and places like that, and Vatican and stuff like that. So who knows? But one last point before we go into the actual text here. But in 1614, a Protestant scholar named Isaac Casaubon, he came out and declared that these documents of the Emerald Tablets were written by semi-Christians. They were forgeries that were made sometime between 200 and 300 AD. He based it off of the linguistic analysis of the era. And for the next 200 years after that, Hermetic literature, which supposedly was embraced by early Christians, was condemned by Christians everywhere after that point. And the Emerald Tablets basically became underground. And the story is that that's the point when the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons picked it up. And if you think about 1614, that's right around when Columbus sailed and found the new land. And it wasn't a few years after that when Sir Francis Bacon wrote The New Atlantis. I think it was the end of the 1600s. So it all kind of makes sense that it went underground, right? Our great Protestant ancestors there.
Right. Okay. So now, before we get into the contents of the Emerald Tablets, which is so interesting when we start comparing them to the Bible and placing exactly who is who and what is what, when you start comparing the literature, keep in mind what we just talked about, which is the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons in their underground dealings sort of took in the teachings of the Emerald Tablets and sort of integrated them into their, I'm not even
belief
really sure.
System,
yeah, I guess we'll just call it a belief system. And like Gonz just mentioned, Sir Francis Bacon and the New Atlantis, and those of you here in America, as many of you may know, we've talked about this before, was meant to be the New Atlantis, and so. Yeah, this is where the founding fathers and the founding doctrines of this country were based on. And so when we read into this and we start talking about the Emerald Tablets and what it means, just keep in mind what that means for us and what it means for, to have our leaders and the creation of our country be based off of, at least include ideas from these tablets.
Right. It's really funny because, and we'll get into the text, but when you start reading some of the Emerald tablets, or at least the translations of this one guy that we have that for this episode, you start finding themes that sound like wisdom that you would find in the Bible. You know what I mean?
It's great. It does. It sounds like it's biblical, and it's a perfect allusion to the deception and the slight twists and how it's so easily to be fooled by,
Yeah, I mean, I just picture guys like John Adams and Ben Franklin, these guys sitting around at a table and reading the Emerald tablets and then going, well, I mean, these principles are in the Bible too. We'll just tell everybody we got this information from the Bible, and then everyone will love us. And you know what I mean? And that could totally be a possibility.
Exactly. And in fact, I mean, there's a lot of documented historical quotes and facts and things that, show that may not be too far from the truth.
Right.
When our founders declared a new order of the ages, they were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled.
So, okay, the basic idea here is that Thoth, who was allegedly an Atlantean, gave humanity universal wisdom, and he came to help humanity. He was the god who established Egypt as a great civilization, and in the tablets, it talks about Thoth, and Thoth is speaking, I think, first person here throughout most of the tablets.
Right.
But he teaches, I'm just going to read it here. Now for a time I descend, and the men of Chem shall know me no more. But in a time yet unborn I will rise again, mighty and potent, requiring an accounting of those left behind me. Then beware, O men of Chem, if ye have falsely betrayed my teaching, for I shall cast ye down from your high estate into the darkness of the caves where from whence you came. Betray not my secrets to the men of the north or the men of the south, lest my curse fall upon ye. And what's interesting is that Chem, Khem, could very much be talking about Ham in the Bible. And the reason why that possibility exists is because Ham in the Hebrew is actually Cam. It's Cham, and it means hot. And I don't know if the hotness has anything to do with it, but we know that one of Ham's kids, named Mizraim, that name is Egypt. That's where the name Egypt comes from.
Right.
And that's, again, that's the line where we get the Philistines and the craziness going on. So when Thoth is talking about, hey, I established Egypt and I did it through the men of Chem,
right,
it's quite possible that he's talking about Ham.
Ham and Ham's line, who were basically the bearers of the antediluvian corruption after the flood into that world.
Right. And I don't know. I just think it's really interesting that the narrative kind of sounds like it's, hey, I helped these people out after the flood. I'm here to help rebuild civilization. And it's just very strange.
It is very strange. That's what it is.
But let's move on here with the text. Okay, so here's another part that's kind of interesting here. He talks about the flood. And he says, over the world then broke the great waters, drowning and sinking, changing earth's balance, until only the temple of light was left, standing on the great mountain on Undal, still rising out of the water. Some there who were living saved from the rush of the fountains. So he seems to be indicating that the top of a great mountain, which was Atlantis, according to him, didn't sink underwater, which is problematic if you're a Bible believer, because the Bible says the water covered the entire earth.
Right. But then it says something about, fast we fled toward the sun of the morning, until beneath us lay the land of the children of Chem. Now, we talk about fast we fled toward the sun of the morning. There's a few things we can talk about here. One being, sun of the morning being the sun in the sky, which would seem to support some sort of flying vehicle or something. Or if you think of toward the sun of the morning, the morning star.
Right. Well,
You know.
we know Venus being that also alluding to that. But yeah, you're right. The son of the morning being Lucifer.
Right, Lucifer, the light bearer. And until beneath us lay the land of the children of Chem. The children of Ham, presumably, I don't know, maybe sounds like Earth.
Yeah.
Raging, they came out with cudgels and spears, lifted in anger, seeking to slay and utterly destroy the sons of Atlantis. So here it's, there's nothing really biblical going on right there.
Yeah, it's like it deviates on all the details of what happened. It's like, no, the flood really didn't cover the earth. No, we actually went off planet and then came back down, and these children of Chem were trying to kill us. So
well, you see, that's the interesting thing, because here it'll say, over the world then broke the great waters, drowning and sinking, changing the earth's balance. Sure, there was a flood. Of course there was a flood. Everybody knows that. The Bible says that. The flood's there. But, and then throws in a little twist saying, well, there was the top of a great mountain, and on top of this mountain, there were some who were spared.
Right, and he's one of those who was spared.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and even to speculate a little bit, and this is, I'm not trying to deviate at all from biblical accounts, but if there were a great mountain that was sticking out of the water and a few people survived there, or a few beings survived there, perhaps that might be where the remnants survived to continue the corruption of the human race.
Right.
So that's just an interesting speculation. But then it says we fled toward the son of the morning, which, could be flying out into outer space, or we ran to Lucifer. We ran to the morning star.
Right.
Lucifer. And so, maybe it's something like, Satan helped us out a little bit.
Right. And if you hadn't noticed, we're rendering this emerald tablet with biblical eyes, and we kind of just snuck it in there, but I think you guys realize that it's what we're talking about here is
the emerald tablets are obviously from the enemy's hand.
Right.
They're slight biblical references, and then saying, well, but this, but and then it goes on and ends with, now before me opens the portal, go I down into darkness of night. And Thoth, or is it Thoth or Thoth?
I think Thoth. I've been saying Thoth, I think so.
Thoth or Thoth. Thoth. He
Tater Tots.
Tater Tots continually talks about how he basically lives in the underworld.
Right.
That's where he's from.
Right.
It's just, right off the top of your head, we know that this guy is of the enemy. And so.
Well, yeah, and he keeps alluding to this idea that you have to pass through the dark halls of Amenti, this dark underworld, to get to the place of light where all these other god beings live and all this stuff. And it just sounds way too much like a lot of the same occult teachings that you hear in the secret societies.
Absolutely does. And
even some of the initiation rituals of being blindfolded, and the rumors of what people go through to be in some of these good old boy clubs.
Exactly. And what is that young woman's name who is
Svali?
Svali talks about some of the rituals that she went through being based on this principle where you have to go down into the darkness to be able to be, enlightened.
Right.
Coincidentally, just a little rabbit trail. It's interesting if you look at this passage or this part of Thoth's story through the eyes of a hollow earth theory.
Yeah.
Going down through a tunnel to get to, a light inside the earth. For those of you who aren't familiar, hollow earth theory is a theory where the earth is actually hollow and inside is, a whole new world with giant beings and stuff like that. So that's a whole nother episode. We've talked about it before, but you can look into that if you want.
Well, just to touch on that point,
sure.
If you look at the 4th section of the Book of Enoch, it actually talks about the Lord talking to the Archangel Michael, and he tells him to go inform Semyaza, who's one of the fallen angels running around, that they're going to be bound for 70 generations under the hills of the earth until the day of judgment, until they're thrown into basically the abyss of fire. So,
right.
Even that there's any ancient text. It's funny how you read it, and there's always this connection to these guys going to this other world, and Thoth is no exception. He's definitely talks about how he has to go to the underworld and do his thing. And then this whole thing made me think about Revelation 9, where obviously most people know this, where it talks about, and out of the smoke of locusts came down upon the earth, and they were given power like that of scorpions, and the locusts were preparing for battle, and
they looked like horses.
They looked like horses with human faces, but they were they had things like scorpions, and they had crowns of gold, and I mean they're just come on,
pretty messed up,
pretty messed up. But the leader of this basically army thing that comes out of the abyss is Abaddon, and in the Greek it's Apollyon.
Right.
And so let me read this part from the Emerald Tablets that comes towards the end of the Emerald Tablets. And this is what Thoth says here. He says, "Upon earth, I am the holder of the keys to the gates of the sacred land. Command I by the powers beyond me to leave the keys to the world of man. Before I depart, I give ye the secrets of how ye may rise from the bondage of darkness, cast off the fetters of flesh, and have bound ye, rise from the darkness into light." And so it's a really, actually that sounds really Gnostic, but the point that I wanted to highlight is when he says, "Upon earth, I am the holder of the keys to the gates of the sacred land."
Right.
And obviously, if this is Lucifer, his sacred land is like the underworld, right? So,
right.
So you read Revelation 9, the first verse, and it says, "The first angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that fell from the sky to the earth." Lucifer, son of the morning, right? And then it says, "The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss."
It's so awesome. I love how it connects so perfectly.
So here's Thoth. He's like, "I have the key." And then Revelation's like, yeah, the one who has the key is the one who opens the abyss. And
he's already, Satan has already given himself away in these Emerald Tablets.
Yeah.
I mean, he's there. Either it's himself or it's someone, just right there with him, talking. The language used in these Emerald Tablets is so much so that you would read it and you would think, oh, yeah, okay, good. Yes, lead us to the light. This is wonderful. And you could totally see how these guys would cling on to this thinking, it's kind of biblical-esque sounding principles. And then you read it and it's literally Satan describing, lying to everybody, using his name, I'll bring you to the light. I'll enlighten you, just come down into the abyss with me because I hold the keys to the abyss, and come with me and we will, and I'll give you all the knowledge and you will rise from the bondage of darkness.
I will give you this cool bird mask.
Right. And yeah, exactly. That's a different translation. But, and then it's just, it mirrors this Revelation 9:1. And when I say mirror, I mean exactly that. It's mirror. It's not exact.
It's the counterfeit.
It's counterfeit. It's opposite. It's the exact opposite, but it's almost like they, it's almost like I don't even know what to say about it. I mean, it's exactly what it is. It says they're right there in Revelation. Yeah, and so when you look at the Emerald Tablets with biblical eyes, you see it is a letter, basically, from Satan or the enemy or whoever's in charge at this point. Some fallen angel who's trying to pull a con on the esoteric believers, saying that he's Thoth and wants to lead us all down into the darkness,
so that we can be light bringers, ourselves.
Yeah. So the thing that I take away from this, and this is just how it is reading these esoteric writings, is that it sounds biblical. The principles sound biblical when you read them, and that's how so many have been deceived by this.
Yeah.
But then when you actually look at it through biblical eyes, it's so blatant that it's the enemy, and he's doing a wonderful job of tricking people. I mean, like we talked about before, the founding fathers of the United States, and a lot of the, don't get me wrong, around the world, this is a worldwide thing, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, all the powers that be, they subscribe to this. Not only this, but more. And so when you think that, this is actually what they meant when they were writing about, so many things at the beginning of our nation, and building the monuments and painting the paintings, that Jesus is in none of them. But lo and behold, we have Apollyon, we have everybody else.
We have the apotheosis of George Washington.
Exactly. We have George Washington and,
ascending into godhood.
Exactly.
In the tundra.
Exactly.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah. So that's the fun part. And to see how things like this fit in a biblical sense, not in a good way, mind you, but in, the opposite way.
Right.
And so if we go back to Atlantis for a moment, we see that Thoth is the representative of Atlantis. He's the Atlantean.
Right.
He's the one who holds the knowledge from Atlantis.
Right. He's passing it down to humanity.
Right, exactly. And so, there's no wonder why, you can get funding to send robots to the bottom of the ocean to find Atlantis.
Right.
Because most powerful, the wealthiest men in the world are...
they're trying to rebuild they're trying to rebuild the city of Enoch. They're trying to rebuild the Tower of Babel. They're the same thing. The same plan
exactly
that was put in place, since the Garden of Eden. They're just trying to do, and unfortunately, there's people that are being fooled by this too, and
exactly
they just happen to be very powerful. Right,
and so we don't talk about Atlantis and the way that it fits into the Bible. We don't talk about the Emerald Tablet and the way they relate to the Bible in order to somehow try to fit them into dogma or know thine enemy, know the workings of darkness, so you'll know how to
expose them.
Right.
Yeah. And this is, I think, a great example of that, because like you said, it reads like any other occult writing that, again, they always want to have some kind of biblical reference or some kind of historical reference that the Bible confirms, to have that little bit of credibility, oh yeah, there's a little bit of this truth that from the past or from whatever, but here's more. You're not being told the whole story, so
exactly
listen to the bird face man, because he has all the and if you read some of the other history of ancient Egypt, you find that Thoth is also responsible for the trio of gods, Osiris, Horus, and Isis. That whole story comes directly from Thoth, basically Thoth having children. And that whole concept, again, it goes back to the Genesis 6 of hey, God's coming down and mating and having children and that being passed down. And I actually ran across something that allegedly happened in Japan, or I guess it was in the early 1900s, Japan, because Japan's they've always felt that their leaders, like their emperors and stuff, are descendants from gods,
Right.
They've always had that belief system there in the Shinto religion there. So same thing. It's like, I don't know. It's just really strange when you start looking at everything, and everything kind of makes sense. It's in light of knowing that it's not really, maybe we're making too much of what it is. Maybe we're trying to glorify the dots more than they really, maybe there's less connection than we're making out to be, but
perhaps.
In general, I think it's fascinating to look at and at least speculate the possibility that, this other stuff, there might be some, you can call it truth, but it's not important truth. It could be an accounting of something that might have gone down, but it doesn't really change the information that we need for salvation. So,
right. And these are just the things that we need to be educated on, because, we live in a world and where the new age and the, especially in 2013 now, there's all sorts of hocus pocus going to be going on.
Speaking on that real quick, by the way, I just have to inject this. I read, there was a lot of talk after the non-event there in December 21st, online, all these new age guys Not the big names. They haven't really come out and said a whole lot, but some of these other, just smaller people that have bought into the whole idea. There was one that came out and posted on this forum, and he was apologizing that the ascension didn't happen. And his premise was that it was supposed to happen, but the bad guys, the evil energies or whatever, prevented it from happening.
Oh,
and
those evil
his
energies.
proof of this was that his mother got a headache the December 21st, 2012, a really bad headache, and that was supposed to be ascension being held back.
Well, if that isn't ascension being held back, I don't know what is.
So anyway, I mean, the fallout is there.
She should have tried some of this Advil PM.
Apparently.
That's the hard stuff.
Apparently
man.
It makes you hungry.
Okay, so there you have it, folks. Thanks again for tuning into Canary Cry Radio. We hope you were informed, stimulated a little bit here on Atlantis Thoth and the Emerald Tablets. Looking at it from a little bit more of a biblical view and making some comparisons, some contrasts. Make sure to tune in again to Canary Cry Radio. And as always, think outside the cage.
And we were supposed to mention something about something at the end.
Right. I don't remember
what it is. It had something to do with you.
Oh, the accent.
Oh yeah.
I don't even.
You were gonna. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that was terrible. That was just terrible accent.
I told you. I was telling you to apologize to the people for.
Oh, I sincerely apologize. I don't know why you didn't stop me. I hold you half
responsible for
responsible for that. I got to work on my. So I was gonna do a whole series of accents, but after hearing that, I don't even think I could bring myself to do it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Canary Cry Radio. The show notes for this episode and many others are available at canarycryradio.com. Make sure to connect and like our Facebook page at facebook.com/canarycryradio. Follow us on Twitter at Canary Cry Radio. If you would like to share the show in video format, you can find us on YouTube by searching Canary Cry Radio. Review us on iTunes with 5 stars and give us a thumbs up on stumbleupon.com. We would like to thank those of you who have given us your support, prayers, and donations. If you would like to join us and support Canary Cry Radio financially, you could do so by visiting canarycryradio.com and clicking the support tab. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, remember to think outside the cage.